They saw a shape cutting through the darkness, a silent outline drifting across the Pacific night. No lights, no echoes of engines, just a cold shadow moving with impossible calm. Most ships announce themselves before they arrive. They roar. They shimmer. They light up every radar screen from miles away. Destroyers, especially, are anything but subtle. Loud machines built for power, not for mystery. But this one broke every rule of the sea. It didn't crash through waves like a steel giant. It sliced through them, as if the ocean itself was trying not to disturb whatever this thing was. From a distance, it looked less like a ship and more like a drifting monolith carved from black stone. No mast, no exposed antennas, no curves, no traditional profile. Just flat surfaces, sharp edges, and an eerie stillness that didn't belong on a warship. It didn't reflect moonlight. It swallowed it. To the few sailors who ever saw it at night, the feeling was always the same. As if the ocean had suddenly grown colder, as if something enormous was passing by without making a single sound. Even the waves around it seemed to behave differently. They didn't break or crash against the hull. They folded away, quietly, almost respectfully, as if the sea itself understood that this was no ordinary visitor. And then, without warning, the night erupted. A flash tore across the sky. A missile burst upward from the dark silhouette, rising so fast it left a glowing wound in the sea beneath it. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. This wasn't a warning shot. It was an announcement, a declaration that something powerful, something unseen, was now awake. Because this wasn't a normal destroyer. This wasn't even from the same generation of warships the world had grown used to. This was something else, entirely. A machine, built to appear on radar like a fishing boat, yet strike like an entire fleet. A ship designed to disappear into the horizon and reappear only as fire. There are warships. And then there is the USS Zumwalt. When the USS Zumwalt finally appeared to the world in daylight, it didn't look any less strange than it did in the dark. People expected the Navy's newest destroyer to resemble the Arleigh Burke, tall mast, wide bridge, familiar silhouette. Instead, they saw something that looked more like a futuristic battleship than anything afloat today. At first glance, many people weren't even sure what part of the ship they were looking at. The sloped, faceted sides, the wide angular bow, the absence of any visible weapons. It looked more like a science fiction prototype than a real warship about to join the United States Navy. But the confusion was intentional. Zumwalt was designed during the years when the Pentagon believed the next major naval threat wouldn't be another navy, but a missile. A hypersonic missile, a sea-skimming missile, a swarm of drones. A threat that didn't care how thick your armor was or how far your guns could reach. So the Navy asked a bold question. What if a destroyer didn't try to survive by blocking a missile, but by never being seen in the first place? That idea became the core of the Zumwalt-class. Every line of the ship, every angle, every surface was shaped to bend radar waves away. Instead of lighting up a radar screen like a 610-foot warship, Zumwalt returns a radar signature closer to a fishing boat. A threat could be tracking a target the size of a small trawler, only to discover, far too late, that it was staring down the most advanced destroyer the United States had ever built. And that terrified people. Naval analysts in Asia called it a ghost ship. Some European defense reports described it as the first warship designed for the next century, not this one. Even Russia made a statement admitting it was uncertain how to classify the vessel. The truth was simple. Zumwalt wasn't meant to look impressive. It was meant to look invisible. And in modern warfare, invisibility is power. If the outside of the Zumwalt looked like something from the future, the inside was even more shocking. Because buried deep within this strange angular hull was a power system the Navy had never put on a destroyer before. an integrated power system capable of generating almost 78 megawatts of electricity. To put that into perspective, that's enough power to light up a small city. Yet, here it was, installed inside a single warship. Traditional destroyers divide their power. Some goes to the engines, some to the electronics, some to the weapons. Zumwalt didn't. Zumwalt ran everything: propulsion, sensors, weapons, computers, off one unified electrical grid. It was a floating power plant disguised as a destroyer, and the world immediately understood what that meant. For decades, the Navy had dreamed of energy-hungry weapons: railguns, high-energy lasers, advanced missile defenses, next-generation radars that could scan half the ocean at once. Every one of them needed enormous power. No ship could deliver it, until Zumwalt. Suddenly, this strange-looking destroyer wasn't just stealthy. It was a test platform for weapons the world had only read about. Defense analysts began writing reports with titles like Zumwalt, the first ship built for railguns, the platform for directed energy weapons, future-proofed warship. Countries took notice. China accelerated its own railgun program. Russia publicly complained that the U.S. was changing the nature of naval warfare. Some warned the Zumwalt could become the template for a new kind of navy, one where electricity, not gunpowder, defined power. And yet, despite all that capability, the ship remained silent at sea. No huge exhaust stacks, no roar of gas turbines, just a low hum, barely audible, thanks to electric motors that made Zumwalt the quietest destroyer the U.S. had ever built. Not only was it invisible on radar, it was nearly invisible to sonar as well. A ship that couldn't be seen. A ship that couldn't be heard. And now, a ship with the power to run weapons no enemy navy had defenses for. That combination sent a chill through the global military community, because this wasn't just a destroyer anymore. This was a preview of naval warfare in the 21st century. For all its stealth and electrical power, the most controversial part of the Zumwalt wasn't hidden at all. In fact, it sat right on the bow, two enormous futuristic cannons known as the Advanced Gun Systems, or AGS. When Zumwalt was first revealed, these guns caused a wave of excitement. This wasn't old naval artillery. This was something entirely new: long-range, high-precision naval gunfire capable of striking targets over 70 miles away. At the time, no ship in the world had anything like it. The weapon was meant to fire a special guided shell, the Long-Range Land Attack Projectile, or LRLAP. It traveled at incredible speed, adjusted mid-flight, and hit targets with the accuracy of a missile but at a fraction of the cost. On paper, it was brilliant. In reality, it collided with a hard truth. The Navy originally planned to build 32 Zumwalt-class destroyers. With that many ships, the cost of producing LR-LAP ammo would drop dramatically. But the program was cut. First to 24 ships, then to 7, and finally to just 3. With so few ships, the cost of each shell skyrocketed. At one point, a single round was estimated between $800,000 and $1 million, more expensive than a Tomahawk cruise missile. Suddenly, a weapon designed to be affordable was now too expensive to fire. Critics rushed in. Some called Zumwalt a failed ship. Others said it was a billion-dollar destroyer with guns it can't use. But that criticism missed the real picture. The Navy didn't build Zumwalt around its cannons. It built Zumwalt around its power. The guns were one system. The ship was a platform designed for future systems. The Navy quickly shifted the ship's mission. Zumwalt would no longer focus on land attack. It would become a platform for hypersonic missiles, weapons capable of traveling more than 3,800 miles per hour. These new missiles would give Zumwalt a strike range unmatched by any surface combatant on Earth. For a ship already invisible at sea, this was the ultimate upgrade. Zumwalt wasn't obsolete. It was evolving. Most warships are designed to hide their intentions. Zumwalt was designed to hide its existence. Its stealth wasn't a gimmick. It wasn't a marketing phrase. It was the single most extreme survival strategy the U.S. Navy had ever engineered into a surface ship. The key was the hull. Traditional destroyers have exposed railings, antennas, weapon mounts, lifeboats, all of which bounce radar waves back to the sender. That's why a 300-foot ship appears on radar as a 300-foot ship. Zumwalt's hull didn't do that. Its sides rose like the walls of a pyramid, angled outward at 10 degrees, a shape called a tumble-home design. These angles deflected radar waves up toward the sky instead of back to the enemy. To a radar operator, Zumwalt didn't appear as a warship. It appeared as a small civilian vessel, or sometimes as nothing at all. During early sea trials, engineers noticed something strange on the sensors. Sometimes Zumwalt's signature flickered, sometimes it shrank, sometimes it disappeared completely. Even when the ship was physically visible on the horizon. Foreign militaries noticed too. One Pacific nation reported that Zumwalt's radar profile resembled that of a fishing vessel. Another classified briefing described it as a ship that breaks targeting logic. Missile tracking algorithms are trained on predictable shapes, large, metallic, reflective. Zumwalt is none of those things. And that creates a very real battlefield problem. If a missile can't get a proper lock, it can't track. If it can't track, it can't hit. If it can't hit, that means a 15,000-ton destroyer just slipped through the engagement envelope unnoticed. That's not just stealth. That's psychological warfare. Imagine being an enemy commander, watching your radar screens, knowing a U.S. destroyer could be approaching your coast, but you have no way of knowing where it is, how close it is, or whether it's already in missile range. It turns every naval officer into a gambler, and Zumwalt holds all the cards. And because the ship is nearly silent underwater, submarines struggle to detect it too. On the surface, invisible. Underwater, quiet. In battle, unpredictable. Zumwalt doesn't just avoid detection. It denies enemies the confidence to act. And that might be its most powerful weapon of all. For all the fear Zumwalt created abroad, the most surprising reactions came from the sailors who stepped inside it for the first time. Because nothing, absolutely nothing about this ship feels like a traditional destroyer. A typical Arleigh Burke-class destroyer carries a crew of over 300 sailors. Zumwalt? Just 147. That reduction wasn't because the ship needed less capability. It was because the ship was designed to run itself. Zumwalt uses one of the most advanced automation systems ever installed on a warship. Pumps, valves, engines, weapons, power grids, radar arrays. Everything is monitored and adjusted automatically. Hundreds of mechanical tasks normally handled by humans are controlled by software. It's the first destroyer in U.S. Navy history where computer technicians outnumber traditional deck crew. And then there's the bridge. Walk onto Zumwalt's bridge and you won't see brass compasses, massive wheels, or old mechanical throttles. You see what looks like the control room of a cutting-edge spacecraft, touchscreen consoles, glass displays, digital steering, panoramic forward windows, multifunction operator stations. There's an inside joke among sailors. Zumwalt is the only Navy ship where you can drive it with a controller. That's only partly a joke. During testing, the ship was maneuvered using an Xbox controller to operate the massive 155mm guns. Automation didn't just reduce crew size. It changed how the crew worked. Instead of dozens of sailors running damage control, Zumwalt uses automatic compartment sensors, fire suppression systems, and sealed blast-resistant bulkheads. Instead of large engineering teams, 2 or 3 sailors can operate systems that once required entire divisions. Foreign navies were stunned. Some called it dangerous to rely so heavily on automation. Others called it the future. But one thing was undeniable. Zumwalt proved that the Navy could operate a 15,000-ton warship with a crew size normally found on small frigates. This wasn't just a new destroyer. It was a new way of thinking. A ship built around computers, powered by electricity, sailed by a crew small enough to fit inside a single lecture hall. The future of naval warfare wasn't just stealthy, it was automated. By the late 2000s, the U.S. Navy had a decision to make. Zumwalt was powerful, stealthy, and futuristic. But it was built around a gun system whose ammunition no longer existed. The world assumed the ship was finished, a trillion-dollar mistake rolling gently through the waves. But quietly behind the scenes, the Navy was preparing to transform the Zumwalt into something far more dangerous than originally imagined. The decision was simple but staggering. Convert the Zumwalt-class into the Navy's first operational hypersonic strike destroyers. Hypersonic missiles are not upgrades. They are paradigm shifts. They travel at speeds faster than Mach 5, over 3,800 miles per hour, and follow unpredictable flight paths that make interception nearly impossible. Most warships fire missiles that glide, arc, and follow known trajectories. Hypersonics don't. They dive, maneuver, twist, shift altitude, and strike with the force of a meteor. Giving those weapons to a ship that barely appears on radar? That changes everything. The Navy chose the Conventional Prompt Strike (CPS) system for Zumwalt, a two-stage booster that launches a hypersonic glide body capable of hitting targets thousands of miles inland with pinpoint accuracy. This meant removing the massive 155mm guns and installing new vertical launch silos designed to handle the enormous size and power of hypersonics. For the first time, a surface combatant would carry weapons normally reserved for nuclear deterrent submarines. Analysts reacted instantly. One European military journal called the refit the most significant surface warfare enhancement in 40 years. Chinese defense reports warned that the ship would shift strike dominance in the Pacific. Russia described hypersonics on a stealth destroyer as a destabilizing weapon system, and their fear made sense. Imagine a ship you can barely track, armed with missiles you can't intercept, capable of striking high-value targets deep inland before the enemy even realizes it's within range. Zumwalt had been called many things: a failed experiment, a budget disaster, a misunderstood prototype. But now, the Navy was giving it a new identity. Not as a gunship, not as a support vessel, but as the opening strike platform in any future naval conflict. A ghost ship, now armed with weapons from tomorrow. Today, years after its debut, the USS Zumwalt remains one of the most misunderstood warships on the planet. Critics judged it by the weapons it lost. Admirers judge it by the technology it gained. But ask any naval strategist, and they'll tell you the same thing. The Zumwalt was never meant to fit into the old rules of naval warfare. It was meant to rewrite them. Even now, the ship defies easy classification. Is it a destroyer? A cruiser? A battleship without armor? A prototype for the next generation of warships? In reality, it is all of those things. And none of them. Its stealth remains unmatched. No other 15,000-ton warship in the world can vanish onto radar as easily as a small fishing boat. Its power system remains decades ahead of most navies, ready to support future weapons still in development. Its automation reduces crew load and increases survivability in ways older ships can only admire from afar. And now, with hypersonic missiles on the way, the Zumwalt is becoming something far more significant. The first surface combatant capable of breaking an enemy nation's defenses before a war even begins. That is why rival navies study it. That is why defense agencies write report after report trying to predict its capabilities. That is why foreign commanders openly admit they don't know how to track it, classify it, or counter it. Because the truth is simple. Zumwalt represents a future where warships don't overpower the enemy. They outthink them. A future where radar invisibility matters more than armor. Where electricity matters more than gunpowder. Where a handful of ships with next-generation weapons can dominate entire regions without ever being detected. Zumwalt's story isn't finished. It's only beginning. Once dismissed as a failed program, it is now evolving into one of the most lethal first strike platforms on Earth. A warship built for the conflicts of tomorrow, not the battles of yesterday. And for every Navy watching from a distance, one question remains. If this is what the United States is willing to reveal, what are they hiding next? If you liked our content, then please hit the like button, comment your thoughts, and subscribe for more.